Hello, friends. This is Peter Herbeck. One of the things that the Lord exhorts us to and the apostles exhort us to do in the Word of God is to stay awake, to stay alert, to be wise and savvy, understanding that we're living in a spiritual combat and that the devil has strategies to lead us away from Christ. And one of the things that we see in just prior to the Lord's return, very, very sobering, kind of shocking reality that there will be a great apostasy, a falling away from Christ. That is, believers who reject Christ. It's going to happen in large numbers, apparently. And I think one of the questions is, why? How does the devil succeed to seduce so many people? And what's going on with those who turn away from Christ? Now, I'm going to just mention a couple of things that St. Paul says that are really worth reflecting on, so we can kind of be armed and alert to the strategies of the devil and the susceptibility that human beings have to being deceived in the context of this spiritual combat that we live in every single day. Paul says this in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. He said that people will ultimately turn away and then as a result will be condemned because they, number one, do not love the truth, and they take pleasure in unrighteousness. So here's where the devil wants to lead us, to reject the truth, to refuse to acknowledge the truth, the reality of real things, as I've talked about a number of times on these YouTubes, and the truth that is in Jesus, ultimately, the truth that is God, and God is the ground of all reality. That God is the truth and reveals the truth to us about who we are and how we can be saved and enter into God's kingdom. They do not love the truth. Isn't that something? Number two, they take pleasure in unrighteousness. So they get trapped into sin, habit patterns of sin, which darken the mind and just end up seeking constant pleasure, really. And the devil can serve it up. He can serve up a lot of pleasure to deceive and distract a lot of people. Secondly, in 1 Timothy chapter 4, he explains that people depart from the faith. They'll do so after giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, giving heed to. Now, not being alert, not fighting the fight, being open to the lies of the enemy, the deceiving spirits that are present in the world, calling darkness light and calling light darkness and confusing people. And the doctrines of demons will be communicated. So I think in any time in history, we don't know when the Lord's going to return, but for sure the Lord says, be alert, be awake, be careful about these strategies of the devil, and don't let him seduce you no matter how. So that's a posture that is meant for the disciples within history, no matter what time it is. But I think we're living in clearly an apocalyptic time. This could be, friends, the beginning of the unfolding of the final days. I don't know that. Only God ultimately knows that. But it certainly is an apocalyptic moment when there's a big falling away from the faith that's going on. And often we point to different reasons like the pre-scandal or this or that, but Paul is telling us something different. He's got spiritual insight to the nature of the spiritual battle that we need to take into consideration and be awake to. A couple of years later in 2 Timothy, Paul adds this. He said, those who fall away, will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables, to refusing to endure sound doctrine. I mean, just think about part of why people are leaving the church today is the doctrines of the world, false religion, idolatrous ways of thinking are emerging, suppressing fundamental truths about reality that are really undeniable, and trying to conform people to patterns of life, ways of understanding humanity and life that both obviously are untrue, but most fundamentally, they reject God's plan and purpose. Spiritual combat right at the core. So itching ears, we don't want to face the truth because truth's demands on us are too much. We don't want to live that responsibly, but we'd rather, as Paul said earlier, we want to take pleasure in unrighteousness. We want to get along and be a friend of the world, all that kind of stuff that's present. So then he says this in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. describing again what it's going to be, life's going to be like in the last days, what we're going to be facing and what people get seduced into. Verse 3, but understand this, that in the last days, there will come times of stress. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, fierce, haters of the good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding the form of religion, but denying the power of it. Avoid such people. Friends, this is happening. Again, I don't know if this is the last days. That's not my point. My point is to say this very behavior is the kind of behavior that Paul and the Lord said would happen, that we should be awake and have our eyes open so that we're not seduced to it. So take up these passages, just chew on them and pray them, and then see some of the battles that we're having and the kind of insanity that's going on and the level of lying and deception and the denial of human nature, denial of God's plan and purpose. And so you say, why are so many people falling into this? Why is this happening? Well, Paul laid it out here for us. It's worth meditating on, friends. And if these videos are a help to you, friends, hit the subscribe button, help us spread the word, give us a thumbs up, whatever helps this move forward. Why don't you join us to get the word out? God bless you.